Hi, Fleurette here with inkon3, and thanks for joining me. We're going to have some fun and do some no-line coloring with Fade Out Detail ink. And you can see I'm going to use the Pumpkin Patch stamp set along with some Bristol Smooth cardstock. And this is mixed media because it takes water really well and it has a really nice smooth surface, which I absolutely love. I've placed my stamp on my Misty and I'm going to get my ink on with the Fade Out No Line Coloring ink. What's great about using a Misty is you can stamp it twice depending on your eyesight. If you like it really light or if you need it a little darker, you can do so. So first you can see I wet an area of my pumpkin. Then I reached into my media, and it's a special ink that I'm using right now, and it's kind of a sneak peek, so I can't really tell you what it is, but I will tell you it will be coming out soon, and it is absolutely amazing. One of the things that is absolutely amazing about it that I can tell you is it was designed specifically to go with the Fade Out No Line Coloring ink. They pair beautifully together. It's very buttery smooth and it has a lot of pigment in it. It's artist grade. And wow, I'm telling you a lot more than I thought I would. So you could do this technique with watercolors as well. Because I really can't tell you what I'm using. I wish I could, but it will be revealed very soon. But I went all the way around my pumpkin and wet the whole section. Then I would add a little color to the top, a little color to the bottom, and then just blend my edges together. And now I'm going on to those little seed pods and I'm doing the same thing. I'm adding water to the whole piece and then I'm kind of leaving a nice white area in the center. Now I'm painting in my stems. Oh, here I go. I'm on to doing another pod and you can see I'll put the color at the bottom and around the side and then I'm going to clean my brush. You want to have clean, clear water and blend the edges together. So as I'm coloring, one of the things you might notice is that the ink, the fade out ink, is grabbing the media that I put on top. So it's grabbing the pigment. It's making the coloring a lot easier. I don't really have to worry about my lines because you can see as I lay the color on, they magically appear. And I like to start light and then work my way darker. And what that does is it basically lets you map everything out so you know what you want to do. And then as you continue on, you're going to darken it and darken it. I lost a little footage there on the leaf, but I will be adding more to the leaf in the same fashion that I added the first layer. You always want to let your layers dry in between. So what I did off camera is took my heat gun and then just dried it before I added this next deeper layer of color. And what's so great about the ink that I'm using is there's so much pigment in it. I'm just using the one color right now and you can just see how much detail I'm getting and how vibrant it is. So once I grab my ink, I lay it down, I clean off my brush so that I have clean, clear water in between when I blend my edges. And that's how I get those really nice differentiation between light and dark. So we're going to go along doing a very similar thing here. But one of the questions I'm often asked or people worry about is if I don't finish in time, is the ink going to vanish by the next day? And the answer is no. You can pre-stamp it. You can color a little bit, come back the next day, 2 days later, and you will still see the ink. How it fades out is it becomes the color of the media that you lay on top, kind of like what we talked about earlier. So you're not going to lose your place. It's just a magical ink. And the other thing about it is you can color with warm or cool colors. You don't have to choose because it is a completely neutral color. It just takes on whatever you have put on top without contaminating those colors. So it really is fun and it makes it a lot easier to do. So here you can see I'm continuing to add a little bit of depth by adding a little more color over the areas that have already dried. And I'm just layering it on and getting a little more depth and a little more depth. And I'm still leaving the white areas. And when you see me move my brush off to the side, that's where I'm dipping my brush in clean, clear water, or I can squeegee it out on my ink off cloth and rub it off so that I have a clean brush when I'm blending the edges. And that's how you keep that light area. If you don't clean your brush between, you're going to start moving a lot of that color around, or it starts to collect on your brush no matter what media you are using. Your brush is going to collect it if you don't rinse it off in between. So that really is key to getting that really beautiful dimension and depth of color and between lights and darks. So here you can see I'm leaving some areas light around the edges, and it just kind of fades out and it gives it a really soft, pretty feel. And I'm adding a little more color to the center and in different spots and to the stems. And I'm just going to continue to add until I'm happy. Now you could stop there. I mean, it looks really pretty. But I'm going to start adding, oh, there's a little sneak peek of one of the new inks that's coming. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait till these come out. I have been working on them and developing them for the better part of 2 years. Actually, we started development on this new ink right when Fade Out came out. We knew we wanted to have a color line to go with Fade Out. We wanted to be able to watercolor with it and do so many more things. You will not believe all the different things. So I'm not supposed to tell you all that, but let's continue on. So I've grabbed a little bit of a purple. Purple and orange go really great together. It creates basically a brown, but you'll have some really pretty tones in there. So now I'm just going over some of the spots that I want to darken and give a little more dimension to. And you can see it's just grabbing those lines. So I'm really just laying it on. I'm not being that careful. I'll lay it on dark. Then again, I'll clean my brush off so I have clean, clear water. And then I start the blending process. And you can see how much dimension I'm getting now as I continue to do that. Like I said, you could have left it all tone on tone with orange, but I really wanted to give it that really fall, pretty look with browns and oranges and creams. And so by adding that purple, it's going to do that for me. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the Fade Out ink is sometimes when you're coloring it, you might think that things are getting blurry or something like that, but don't worry, just keep going on. As it dries, everything is going to settle and it's just going to blend really beautifully. It just grabs the color, and when you're watercoloring, you will get some feathering as you're going along. Some papers are very porous or they have a lot of texture to them, and that's one of the reasons I do like the Bristol Smooth. Is it is very smooth and your lines are very smooth. Some people love texture, and there's a time for that too. I sometimes want a little texture, but most of the time I love to work on a really smooth surface. So as you can see, things are moving along really nicely. The other thing I wanted to mention is Fade Out. Let's just talk about the word Fade Out. It doesn't disappear like we were talking about earlier, but it will fade out over time, meaning just the ink lines. If you have a section that you can see, like right when you're coloring it, you're like, oh, I can still see the line. Just let it dry, look at it the next day, and you will be amazed at how light that line becomes. And of course, like I said, if you lay the color onto it, it will be the color of that media that you lay on top. So it's really an amazing no-line coloring ink. It actually is the only one developed specifically for no-line coloring. And like I said, it is also the only one that is completely neutral color, works with warm and cool colors. It's just, I don't know. I wanted to no-line color and I wanted it to be easier and more fun, and I wanted everybody to be able to do it. And that's what motivated me to create the Fade Out ink. And I have been just so busy developing new products and new inks that I don't always have time. I haven't had enough time to talk about all the features and benefits. So I'll be doing a little bit more of that. I'll be doing more of these videos. Here you can see I'm now adding some browns. So we did some purples, which gave a really cool color, and now we're adding some actual browns just to deepen it a little more. So we're working with only 3 colors, and look at how I feel like it just has a really fall, fun feel. I just want to grab those pumpkins, right? So I'm adding it dark, and then I'm cleaning my brush, getting clean, clear water again, and blending it out, and just adding it here and there, like on the base of the leaf. Now, I'm not really worrying about where my shadows are supposed to be. I find that as long as you just have light and dark areas to add interest, it gives you that whole shading and shadowy effect without really worrying about which direction the light is coming from. So don't worry about that. Just color and get some lights and dark areas going. Don't worry too much about where your light source is coming from. If you want to, you can. If you want it to be very precise, but most of the time I will just color it and not worry too much about that. And there is kind of a little bit of rule of thumb. If you see something that's underneath something else, it will be a little bit darker. So you can kind of use that to gauge it. If things are kind of close to one another, you can kind of like you see there on the leaves, I did the base of the leaf darker and then kind of pulled it up to a lighter color. But as long as you have that difference between light and dark, you're going to have a really pretty card or a really pretty painting. So I want to also talk about water. That's something we haven't really talked about. As you notice, I am using a water brush. I used to never use a water brush because I always had trouble with them putting too much water out. But this brush really is great. As long as you're not squeezing it, as with any water brush, you want to make sure not to squeeze it as you're using it. Just let a little bit of water flow out. If you're getting too much water, and that's where I think a lot of people run into trouble, is they get too much water on their brush. If you're working with too much water on your brush, it will dilute the pigment of whatever paint you're using too much, and it's just everything's gonna get blurry and wet, and it just doesn't work. So that's what's really good to have, like an ink off cloth next to you, some paper towels, or something like that where you're always drying off the tip of your brush. You might think you need more water, but most of the time, an almost dry brush, so it just really needs just to be slightly damp, really will give you the best results. So play a little bit, experiment, see how much water you really need on your brush, because I find most of the time when people are having trouble, it is because they always have too much water on your brush. So by dabbing the water off on a cloth or paper towel, it will make such a difference, and your coloring will just get so much better with a little less water. We always think we need more than we do. I don't know what it is. I sometimes wind up with too much water. And you can also take, if you do wind up with a little too much water on your paper, grab your cloth and dab it, and it will grab the excess water. And then, like I did right there, you can see I got a little bit of water on there. I'm glad that happened right as I was talking about it. I dabbed it off. That section will dry a little bit, and I'll be able to add more pigment or paint or ink or anything on there. And so as you can see, you could stop where we are, but I love to just add or layer more color, and so it gets really vibrant and pretty and just a lot of depth. So I'm grabbing a little more orange and I'm layering it on top of the other colors, and so hint hint, you can see that the media that I'm using, I'm able to do that, and it's just amazing the amount of colors I can add and layer, and I'm getting this beautiful no line colored pumpkins. So I'm going to add a little more depth to the centers of the leaves, because that just, I don't know, with leaves I just love to add a little more depth into the centers of the leaf. I'm adding a little more to the sticks, the bases of the leaves. The other thing I realized I didn't tell you is right now at this point, I'm not wetting the paper ahead of time. I'm actually painting with it on my dry colors. So I'm dipping into my ink and then adding more layers on top of the color that I already have down. And now you see I had added some water on the side there and then dabbed it off with a cloth. That's because I kind of must have had some on my hand and I laid it on the paper. So if that happens, just get some clean, clear water and paint it on there, let it set a second, and then dab it off, and you will be able to get most of it off. If when you're all done and everything's dry, don't fuss with it too much while it's still wet. Let it dry and see where it's at. If you still see some, you can always get a white gel pen and cover that, or you can, cut the image out with the die cuts and then you never see it. I also added a little more depth to the stems of the pumpkin. Now look at how great those are looking. And now I'm just drying everything, looking at it, seeing if I need to add anything else. But I think I'm done. I am really liking it. I had so much fun coloring this, and I really hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that I was able to give you some inspiration to maybe try it for the first time, or try it for the 100th time. Or if you're an expert, I hope you enjoyed this. So thank you for joining me. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you liked what you see, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.